What if one of the most powerful repair systems inside your body only fully activated when you stopped eating? That is the idea behind autophagy, a process so important that it helped earn scientist Yoshinori Ohsumi a Nobel Prize. The word means self-eating, but your cells are not destroying themselves randomly. Instead, they identify damaged proteins, worn-out cell parts, and useless waste, then recycle those materials into new energy and raw resources. It is basically a deep cleaning system designed to keep the body functioning under stress. The brain depends heavily on this process because neurons are extremely difficult to replace once damaged. Over time, toxic proteins and dysfunctional structures can begin accumulating inside brain cells, and scientists believe this buildup may play a role in diseases like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's. Under healthy conditions, autophagy helps clear part of that internal clutter before it becomes dangerous. Without proper cleanup, the brain slowly becomes less efficient over the years. This is where prolonged fasting becomes fascinating. When food disappears for long enough, the body starts shifting away from growth and towards survival, repair, and energy conservation. Researchers believe this metabolic switch may increase autophagy activity in several tissues, including the brain. But if this process keeps running for 48 straight hours, does the brain actually become sharper and healthier, or does the stress eventually become too much? That is where the science gets interesting. Most people imagine fasting as an instant path to mental clarity and focus. But during the first several hours, the experience is usually much less glamorous. Your brain still depends heavily on glucose, and as blood sugar levels begin dropping, the body quickly notices that energy intake has slowed down. Even before autophagy becomes highly active, your nervous system is already reacting to the absence of food. That is why many people feel irritable, distracted, hungry, or mentally foggy during the beginning of a long fast. Hunger hormones rise, stress pathways activate, and your brain enters a state designed to push you toward finding food. From an evolutionary perspective, this response helped ancient humans survive periods of scarcity. The discomfort is not necessarily a sign that something is wrong. Often, it is simply your biology recognizing that its normal fuel supply is disappearing. At the same time, important metabolic changes are beginning behind the scenes. Glycogen stores in the liver start running low, insulin levels continue dropping, and the body quietly prepares an alternative fuel source for the brain. Because the brain cannot simply shut down when glucose decreases, the body starts building a backup energy system that may completely change how the brain functions during the next stage of the fast. Somewhere between 18 and 24 hours into fasting, the body enters a major metabolic transition. Glycogen reserves become depleted, insulin stays low, and the liver starts producing larger amounts of ketone bodies. These ketones can cross into the brain and provide energy when glucose is no longer widely available. This is not a small adjustment. It is a complete shift in the fuel source powering your thoughts, emotions, and concentration. What surprised researchers is how well the brain can adapt to ketones once this transition begins. Some studies suggest ketones may produce energy more efficiently while generating fewer harmful byproducts than glucose metabolism. This may help explain why some people suddenly report clearer thinking, calmer emotions, and stronger focus during prolonged fasting. Many describe it as if the constant mental noise becomes quieter, but the experience is not the same for everyone. While some people feel mentally sharp, others experience dizziness, weakness, headaches, or severe fatigue. Hydration, sleep, stress levels, metabolic health, and previous eating habits all influence how smoothly the brain adapts to this new fuel source. The internet often treats fasting like a universal superpower, but real human physiology is much more unpredictable. Once fasting moves beyond the 24-hour mark, scientists believe autophagy activity may increase more aggressively in certain tissues. Researchers still struggle to measure this process directly in humans, but growing evidence suggests prolonged nutrient deprivation sends a strong signal for cells to prioritize repair and internal cleanup instead of growth. In simple terms, the body starts focusing less on building and more on maintenance. Think about a city running non-stop for decades without cleanup crews. Broken machinery, damaged parts, and useless waste would eventually pile up everywhere. Autophagy works like a restoration system inside your cells. It breaks down dysfunctional proteins, damaged mitochondria, and cellular debris, then recycles useful material back into the system. Instead of wasting energy, the body tries to recover and reuse what it can. Inside the brain, this becomes especially important because neurons consume enormous amounts of energy every second. Scientists are now studying whether fasting-induced autophagy could help reduce some of the toxic protein buildup associated with aging and neurodegenerative diseases. The research is promising, but there is an important difference between potential support and guaranteed protection. Many online claims go far beyond what current science can actually prove. By the second day of fasting, the body no longer reacts as though you simply skipped a meal. It begins activating deeper survival adaptations designed to help humans function during long periods without food. From an evolutionary perspective, this may have been critical for survival. Ancient humans needed to stay mentally alert during scarcity so they could hunt, forage, and respond quickly to danger before starvation became life-threatening. Part of this heightened awareness may come from increased levels of norepinephrine and other stress-related neurotransmitters. These chemicals can raise alertness, focus, and responsiveness to the environment. Some people describe becoming unusually aware of sounds, emotions, and small details around them. Others experience moments of intense concentration that feel very different from the stimulation caused by caffeine. At the same time, the body is still under real physical stress. Cortisol may rise, physical energy can drop, and dehydration becomes a serious risk if electrolytes are ignored. This creates a strange contradiction. Physically, the body may feel weaker while mentally the brain sometimes feels sharper. But that balance is fragile. Push fasting too far, and the same survival mechanisms that improve focus can eventually lead to exhaustion, dizziness, confusion, and metabolic strain. Before we continue, comment below. Do you think your brain would become sharper after 48 hours without food? Or would your body start fighting back long before that point? Once fasting passes the 36-hour mark, the brain is operating in conditions that most modern humans rarely experience. At this stage, ketone production is significantly elevated, insulin remains very low, and the body has largely accepted that food is not arriving anytime soon. For some people, this is where the psychological experience becomes unexpectedly intense. Many describe a strange combination of emotional calmness, heightened awareness, and mental silence that feels radically different from their normal day-to-day thinking. Thoughts may feel slower but clearer. Distractions seem less powerful. Even the perception of time can begin changing slightly. Scientists believe several biological mechanisms may contribute to this altered mental state. Ketones themselves are not just fuel molecules. Research suggests they may also influence neurotransmitter balance, inflammation, oxidative stress, and signaling pathways linked to brain function. At the same time, elevated norepinephrine levels may continue increasing alertness and focus. Some researchers also suspect fasting could affect levels of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, often called BDNF, a protein associated with learning, neuroplasticity, and neuronal resilience. Animal studies have shown promising effects, although translating those findings directly to humans remains complicated. But there is another side to this experience that rarely gets discussed honestly online. For many people, extended fasting does not produce clarity at all. It produces exhaustion, sleep disruption becomes more common, stress hormones can remain elevated, and prolonged caloric deprivation may start pushing the body into a physically strained condition. Some individuals become emotionally irritable, mentally foggy, or physically weak rather than focused and energized. This is why fasting should never be treated like a magical shortcut to superhuman cognition. The same biological stress that activates adaptation pathways can also become overwhelming if the body is not responding well. One of the biggest problems with online fasting culture is that people often talk about benefits while barely mentioning the risks. Videos and podcasts frequently present prolonged fasting as though it automatically upgrades the human brain without consequences. But biologically, fasting is still a controlled stressor. The body is not entering some mystical healing dimension. It is responding to the absence of food by activating emergency survival pathways that evolved to keep humans alive during scarcity. As fasting extends further, cortisol levels may rise significantly in some individuals. Blood pressure can drop, hydration becomes more difficult to maintain, and electrolyte imbalances may begin affecting muscle function, heart rhythm, and cognitive performance. This is one reason prolonged fasting can become dangerous when done irresponsibly. Dizziness, fainting, weakness, headaches, confusion, and heart palpitations are not signs of detox. In many cases, they are warning signals that the body is struggling to maintain stability under prolonged stress. People with diabetes, eating disorders, certain metabolic conditions, or those taking medications may face even greater risks. There is also a psychological side that deserves more attention. Food is deeply connected to mood, routine, social interaction, and emotional regulation. Extended fasting can affect people very differently mentally. Some become calm and focused, while others experience anxiety, obsessive thinking about food, irritability, or emotional instability. This is why serious researchers usually approach fasting carefully rather than treating it like a universal solution for every health problem. The science around autophagy is fascinating, but fascination should never replace caution. One of the reasons scientists became so interested in autophagy is because of what happens when the process stops functioning correctly. Inside aging brains, abnormal proteins can begin accumulating over time. In Alzheimer's disease, beta amyloid plaques and tau tangles are among the most well-known examples. In Parkinson's disease, alpha-synuclein proteins can build up in damaging ways. Researchers notice that many neurodegenerative diseases share a common theme. The brain slowly loses efficiency in clearing toxic cellular waste. That discovery raised an important question. If autophagy is one of the brain's internal cleanup systems, could enhancing it potentially help reduce part of this buildup before it becomes catastrophic? Animal studies have shown intriguing results. In some laboratory models, increased autophagy activity appears associated with improved removal of damaged proteins and dysfunctional cellular components. Scientists are now exploring whether fasting, caloric restriction, or compounds that mimic fasting pathways could eventually play supportive roles in brain health and aging research. But this is where people often misunderstand the science. There is currently no evidence proving that fasting alone prevents Alzheimer's, cures neurodegenerative disease, or guarantees long-term cognitive protection. Human brains are extraordinarily complex, and diseases like Alzheimer's involve genetics, inflammation, vascular health, metabolism, lifestyle, and many other interacting factors. What researchers are saying is not fasting cures the brain. What they are saying is that autophagy may be one important piece of a much larger puzzle scientists are still trying to understand. Scientists studying fasting often focus on much more than weight loss. In recent years, researchers have investigated how repeated fasting patterns may affect inflammation, insulin sensitivity, metabolic flexibility, oxidative stress, and cognitive performance. Some studies suggest that fasting protocols may improve the body's ability to switch efficiently between glucose and fat metabolism, which could potentially support energy regulation and metabolic health over time. There is also growing interest in how fasting affects the brain indirectly through overall systemic health. Chronic inflammation, insulin resistance, poor sleep, obesity, and cardiovascular dysfunction are all associated with increased risk of cognitive decline later in life. By improving some of these metabolic markers, fasting may create conditions that are more supportive of long-term brain function. Certain individuals who practice structured fasting routines report improvements in focus, appetite regulation, emotional stability, and mental energy. However, scientists are still trying to separate measurable biological effects from placebo, lifestyle changes, and individual variability. What often gets lost online is that many people who fast regularly also change multiple other behaviors simultaneously. They may improve diet quality, reduce processed foods, exercise more consistently, sleep better, or become more mindful about overall health. This makes it difficult to isolate fasting as the single reason for every positive outcome. Real scientific research rarely produces simple black and white answers. Human biology is influenced by layers of interacting habits that work together over years, not just by one isolated behavior performed for 48 hours. By the end of a 48-hour fast, the human body has entered a metabolic state far removed from normal modern eating patterns. Ketones are elevated, glycogen stores are extremely limited, insulin remains suppressed, and survival pathways associated with repair and adaptation are highly active. In some individuals, this creates a powerful sense of clarity, emotional stillness, and mental sharpness, unlike anything they experience during constant food intake. In others, it produces fatigue, weakness, irritability, and physical stress that clearly signals the body has reached its limit. The truth is that fasting is neither a miracle nor a myth. The human brain evolved in environments where periods without food were common, meaning our biology developed sophisticated systems to survive scarcity. Autophagy appears to be one of those systems, helping cells manage damage, recycle components, and adapt to nutritional stress. That does not mean more fasting is always better. Survival mechanisms are designed to handle temporary challenges, not endless deprivation. There is a point where beneficial adaptation can eventually become harmful strain if pushed too far. Maybe the most fascinating part of all this is what fasting reveals about the modern world itself. Human beings spent most of history dealing with uncertainty around food, movement, and survival. Today, many people live in the opposite reality: constant eating, constant stimulation, and almost no metabolic rest at all. The fact that the body activates ancient repair systems during temporary scarcity may say something profound about the conditions the human brain was originally designed for. But understanding those systems responsibly requires something far more valuable than hype or fear. It requires patience, nuance, and respect for what science actually knows, and what it still does not. If this video changed the way you think about fasting and brain health, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who has been curious about autophagy. And in the comments below, tell me this. After hearing the science behind it, would you ever attempt a full 48-hour fast yourself?